I don't know if I understand. Because I thought y'all said if you just comply with law enforcement, then these things would never happen. Right? Alright, welcome to Taste Take. If you're new here, I give spoiler-free movie and TV reviews. Give you a little background, just let you know if I think it's worth checking out or not. If that's something you're into, hit that subscribe button for your boy. For my regular taste takers, let's see if Netflix is still making fire documentaries or if the end is near. Get it? I said the end is near, like, never mind. Alright, let's do some background / plot time here. Waco, American Apocalypse is a new 3-part docuseries on Netflix that's releasing around the 30-year anniversary of the famous Texas tragedy. It was directed by Tiller Russell, who also did Night Stalker, also on Netflix. This series features a whole bunch of unreleased exclusive footage that no one's ever seen before, especially from the FBI, like from their crisis negotiation unit, like their secret recordings, and like a whole bunch of news footage that never made it to the air. Alright, so full disclosure, I never heard anything of this story. Yeah, and of course I was very young when it was popping off, but still, to this day, I had no idea. So watching this documentary was all new to me. So I guess I'll explain what happened here in case you're like me, and then I'll get into my thoughts on the documentary. Alright, so boom, it's February 28th, 1993, and we have day one of a violent showdown between the FBI and members of the Branch Davidian religious group. But Tate, what are you even talking about? Why would the FBI be in a violent showdown with a religious group? Well, this group was led by a dude named David Koresh, and he convinced his followers that he was the Messiah and he was their key to eternal salvation. You know how that goes. So he had this big ass group of followers, men, women, children, and they all lived in this big ass compound called Mount Carmel. That's in Waco, Texas. And since David got his followers to believe that the apocalypse was coming, he basically had them preparing at all times. So in preparing, they got a whole bunch of weapons and like a lot of weapons. They basically turned this thing into like a military base, and the government is not going to just let you have a military base. Only the government can be a military base. It's like only one person could be the military, you know? You know how they are. Then comes ATF. That's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which I hate when acronyms don't match up to the letters exactly, because you got the E right there for explosives, but they don't include it. But if they did include it, it could be a real word like fate, firearms, alcohol, tobacco, explosives, like fate instead of ATF. But I guess because it wouldn't be the firearms next to the explosives, I guess they need to be hanging out with each other. But in the end, fate sounds way better than ATF. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, so ATF gets word that a lot of these weapons at the compound are illegal. For example, they were turning semi-automatic weapons into automatic weapons. Like, you can't do that. And you're supposed to be like a religious group. Why you need that? But good luck taking some guns away from people in Texas, no matter what kind of group they are. So yeah, February 28th is the day that ATF pulls up. They're trying to execute a search and arrest warrant. They just want to come and ask some questions. They're just trying to see what's going on. They don't want no smoke. Hey, we're just here. Just ask a couple questions. See what you guys got going on up in here. As soon as they get to the door, shots are fired. ATF is shooting. Branch Davidians are shooting. It's mayhem. This shooting goes on for 2 hours and ends with 4 dead ATF officers and 5 dead Branch Davidians. Now, there's 2 crazy things about this. Well, the whole thing is indeed crazy. But let me just talk about 2 things. First, to this day, no one knows who fired that first shot. The ATF, of course, says it wasn't them. Who knows if you could believe the government? And of course, the Branch Davidians say it wasn't them. And I can't prove that either. Great. Number 2, after this shootout, this standoff went on for a total of 51 days. Yeah, it became the largest gunfight on American soil since the Civil War. That's crazy. And on top of that, it was costing the FBI $1 million per day. So this docuseries is showing a whole bunch of footage of what was happening on the front lines, not to mention what was happening behind the scenes, like a lot of negotiation and just trying to get the shit under control. All of this while the world watched. They call this pretty much the first 24/7 news story. A lot of people think it's OJ, but that was a couple years later. It was this. Then you got some present day testimony from some of the agents that were on the scene. I'm talking about like some of the guys that were really up in there shooting. Like they're talking on the thing. And they got some present day testimony of some of the Branch Davidians that were literally living in this compound from like their side of the story. And they're not even like, yeah, we were crazy. Like, man, what a time. They're like, they're still about their life. And they're in the documentary. So what's my take? This is such a wild story, but I don't think the documentary does as good of a job as I would think explaining just how crazy this whole thing is. To be fair, the documentary seems to want to lean towards like a lot of like the tactical strategy stuff, like ATF, FBI strategies, negotiation, tactics, like how to get hostages out of hostage situations. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of that like government stuff. Personally, I wanted to know more about David Koresh and how he got to be this way. I had to look a lot of that stuff up, which I'll get to a little later in the video. There is a part of the documentary that floats this idea that the audience has to decide who was right and who was wrong. Like, was this just some crazy religious cult looking to start trouble? Or did the ATF overstep their boundaries and start this dangerous trend of unlawful government overreach? I don't know, man, maybe both. Because when it comes to the government, a large part of this is in the aftermath. So like during this whole 51-day standoff, people would just pull up to Waco and watch from the sidelines, like as if it was entertainment. One of these people was a man by the name of Timothy McVeigh. Yeah, that Timothy McVeigh. The same Timothy McVeigh that went on to execute the Oklahoma City bombings on the 2-year anniversary of the ending of this Waco siege. And he said he did this to get back at the government for that. Like, it's connected. But if I'm being honest, the government, of course, has its fair share of missteps. Countless of those in this case alone. But sometimes crazy is just crazy. And this David Koresh story is just crazy. Let me just try to give you some context into this dude, if you'll allow me the time. This is like a Tate's Take extended cut. This is like when you get the DVD and then you just get the bonus features. This is like the bonus coverage. ISO boom. You know the typical recipe when it comes down to people doing some strange things. 9 times out of 10, it boils down to childhood trauma. And this David Koresh story is no different. David's mom was only 14 years old when he was born. It's like a freaking 8th grader. What's worse than that is that when he was born, she was in an abusive relationship. And that dude wasn't even his dad. That guy was already gone. His mom left him with his grandma when he was 4 years old. Fast forward, and David is a high school dropout. Then, when he was 19, he got a 15-year-old girl pregnant. For those of you counting at home, that's illegal. Then he finds the church and becomes a Seventh-day Adventist. While he's there, he tries to convince the pastor that God told him that he was supposed to marry the pastor's daughter, who was underage. Naturally, the pastor kicked him out of the church. Somewhere down the line, he then finds the Branch Davidian compound. That's Mount Carmel that I talked about in the beginning. The Branch Davidians are like a subset of Seventh-day Adventists. The leader back then was a lady named Lois Roden. She was 67 years old at the time. Her husband, named Benjamin Roden, was like the creator of the Branch Davidians, and he died. So when he died, she just took over. David Koresh tells 67-year-old Lois Roden that he has a problem with excessive masturbation. Then he seduces her and allegedly gets her pregnant. You see why I'm trying to tell you this story is crazy? Like, you only get this stuff on Tate's Take. It's not on Netflix. And here, YouTube is free. Anyway, yeah, he claims he got this 67-year-old woman pregnant and that she had a miscarriage. Yeah, I bet she did. Lois dies a few years later and David now has control of the compound. Like, Lois had a son and he was like, all right, I'm gonna take control. And David was like, nah, I'm gonna hold this down. So like, it's already awkward. The thing about David Koresh is that he had memorized the Bible. So like, he was able to do all this wild shit and then just tie it back to some random thing that he knows from the Bible. People were like very impressed with this. They're like, well, this nigga knows the Bible, so like, we gotta follow him. For example, when David took over, his first wife was 14-year-old Rachel Jones. Wait, what? Okay, yeah, 14. Rachel Jones was the daughter of one of the leaders in the Branch Davidian compound. Like, what is this? This is what he did for years, sleeping with wives and kids. The youngest girl that we know that he slept with was 12 years old, and he would just tie it back to obeying God. He told his followers And let me get a little closer so you can hear me a little better. He told his followers that he needed to indulge in all the sins and degradations of man so when the time came, he could speak from experience. This is serious. At this point, you must be thinking that would be the craziest thing you heard today. I'm afraid not. Because in 1989, that's when David Koresh dropped his latest joint. He called it The New Light. And I don't even know why he called it that, because it was definitely heavy. The New Light basically said that all earthly marriages were annulled, and now all women belong to him. So yes, even the ones in the group. So now all of his male followers had to surrender their wives to him and remain celibate. And you're probably thinking, damn, that's messed up. Just a whole bunch of men forced to masturbate in the house while the Messiah smashes their wife. All right, this is serious, but no, they couldn't masturbate either. All seed was unholy except that of the lamb. Hello, are you dumb? Like, imagine a world where you can do whatever you want and just say, it's cool because God told me to do it. And people believe it. Let me give you another example because maybe you just need something else to follow. There was a time when all the Branch Davidians could only eat once a day. That was the rule. I don't even know why that's a rule. As soon as David couldn't do that anymore, he's like hungry. He said that God allowed him to eat as much as he wanted. David also banned all beer from the compound. But then as soon as he wanted some beer, like you get where I'm going with this. When his prophecies didn't work out, he just made new ones. He told his followers that his band's music was going to spread God's message to the world. No, of course not. It flopped. No one even knew this dude had a band. He also said that Armageddon was going to start in the Holy Land after the Americans invaded. That also didn't come true. Then he switched it and said that Armageddon was actually going to start in Texas. So then when the freaking ATF pulls up, this idiot could be like, see, I told you, my prophecy. Ugh. It's all exhausting and gross what people will allow to believe in something. Like, listen to this direct quote from the documentary. This is from one of the Branch Davidians. In 2023, like currently, people think having sex with a bunch of underage girls is a crime. These girls were adults in our belief system. Don't make an R. Kelly joke. Don't make an R. Kelly joke. Don't. I'm going to give Waco, American Apocalypse 3 stars. The story's crazy. The footage is crazy. The testimony's crazy. I still say that I just want a little bit more background on how we got here. Like I said, this one is just more heavy on the tactical side. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that are into that. Either way, it's good to watch to see what people are willing to do to follow someone they believe in. It's all so scary. And it's not just David Koresh. Like throughout history, how many tragedies came from people just blindly following a single leader? So in 1993, when all this is going on, it was easy for the media to say, look at this crazy cult and the things that they believe in. But if we're being honest, isn't that just a little hypocritical? Because if you ask me, a cult is just a group that your group doesn't agree with. David Koresh wasn't the first religious leader to sexually abuse children. Maybe you got to ask yourself, why is he making me more upset than when the more established religions do it? But that's a discussion for another day. Religious debate aside, this story is just sad because at the end of the day, no matter how you look at it, this Waco standoff resulted in the death of 4 federal agents and 82 Branch Davidians, 28 of those being children. And just to tie this whole thing up in a twisted bow, here's another direct quote from the documentary. Watching everyone I know die was painful, but acceptable, because they did it for their God. Waco, American Apocalypse is available right now, exclusively on Netflix. As always, thanks for checking out Tate's Take. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like and that subscribe button. In the comments, like, what do you think about this case? Do you think the ATF crossed the line? Do you think the Branch Davidians started all this? I know for a fact, well, I can't prove this, but like, I know they started that fire. Also, if you're still listening to this, if you're still like watching this right now, just give me a second. And this is for my Florida people. If you're from Florida and you like Florida music, because I've never heard of this whole story, but the only time I ever heard of David Koresh was from freaking Grind Mode. You know the song Ecstasy?
I just bought it one right there by the bar. She made me follow fresh. Shawty look like Egyptian girl. So now I'm watching